Hi, good evening. Welcome along to Sky Sports News. As Ange Postecoglou's time at Tottenham comes to an end, exactly 2 years on from when he took over. Well, the club has defended its decision. It's described it as one of the toughest decisions they've had to make. In their statement, Spurs said this: "Following a review of performances and after significant reflection, the club can announce that Ange Postecoglou has been relieved of his duties. We're extremely grateful to Ange for his commitment and contribution during his 2 years at the club. Ange will always be remembered as only the third manager in our history to deliver a European trophy, alongside legendary figures Bill Nicholson and Keith Birkinshaw. However, the board has unanimously concluded that it is in the best interests of the club for a change to take place. Following a positive start in the 2023-24 Premier League season, we recorded 78 points from the last 66 Premier League games. This culminated in our worst ever Premier League finish last season. At times, there were extenuating circumstances, injuries, and then a decision to prioritise our European campaign. Whilst winning the Europa League this season ranks as one of the club's greatest moments, we cannot base our decision on emotions aligned to this triumph. This has been one of the toughest decisions we have had to make, and it is not a decision that we have taken lightly, nor one we have rushed to conclude. We've made what we believe is the right decision to give us the best chance of success going forward, not the easy decision. We have a talented young squad, and Ange has given us a great platform to build upon. We should like to express our gratitude to him. We wish him well for the future. He will always be welcome back at our home." Well, welcome in our home is the former Tottenham defender Ramon Vega, who joins us now. Ramon, very good evening. First of all, how do you react to the news that Ange has been sacked?
Well, first of all, good evening, Mike. How are you today?
I'm very well, Ramon.
Well, let me start with this. I think it's a moral crisis around the globe already in the world. And this is now penetrating the sports, in this case, the football. We are now in a place where a trophy is not valid at all whatsoever. And the principles and pretty much the disciplines are not kind of valid the same way, you know. What kind of inspirational and kind of example to bring to the future of these young, talented players? Or you not want to win the trophy anymore, or it's all about money. And in this case, it shows again what it is. It's all about money, nothing about the sport as such. It's diluting as such in terms of the moral, the principles, and the main kind is the love for sports. Who are the losers? Without a doubt, the players and the fans, because the owners, they can decide whenever they want, whenever they like, and it's the money decided. These two parting away, it's just a question how much money they pay and they be quiet. But nobody will talk about really what he actually achieved and what he's done for the club already after 17 years. It's actually sad that actually the football is going that direction. And it's not just at Tottenham. I think it's a global problem we have here. We're not just going to top with the FIFA, with the World Club tournaments coming up. Too many games. It's all about the money. It's all about the politics. The football side is diluting more and more. And it's only a question about money and not a question about how much trophy you have and the respect to win a trophy. Now, the players will think, well, what's the point to win a trophy? I'm not going to be respected anymore. Let's get the contract and get paid as much as I can. Coaches go the same way. And that's quite the most saddest part, what happened today. And I think the principle and disciplines and the moral side point of view should come back to the sports. And be honest with you, that's the most saddest side I heard today, sacking Ange.
But Ramon, is it about money, or is it about the fact that Ange lost 22 of his 38 Premier League games?
Listen, and football only counts the results. I'm sorry, Mike. They won a trophy, European Cup, Mike. It's unbelievable. They're talking about, that's the only excuse that can actually come out. They're actually, the first season, or actually the second season, was unbelievable injuries. with the most, let's call it, unexperienced young talent. You need to reinvent the squad because there was not backing there in the same time. Because 80%, the main squad was out, not injured. If you have the centre half only playing close to 25% of the season, it's impossible to actually really do a successful league, especially if you have all this competition you're playing into it. And that still won the trophy after a disaster kind of injury past the half as well, and also the league. So the league situation, that's an excuse. The question was here, where is actually Tottenham wants to go with this manager? Why they're now sacking something where actually give stability into the whole club? The fans, they enjoyed 250,000 people were to the parade. When are they going to go the next time to do this? This is the most enjoyable thing the fans would like to do. They're not going to talk about they were 20th or 70th in the league. They want to win trophies. And this is what I'm talking about. We are winning a trophy here. And I think it's important. And I think with the main guys up in the board, they have a big clash. There's a personality clash. I don't think this is a technical situation. That was both parties were not going on together. I see Ange, very principled, very disciplined, very calm person. He had the dressing room behind him, and he was saying his dressing room, he's the boss. But the ones above them didn't like that. And that is the clash. When two people not go on, whatever success they are, they're going to go separate ways. And that's what happened today, unfortunately.
I'm glad you brought the board up. In their statement, Ramon, they said, we've got to take emotion out of it, the emotion of winning that trophy. Now, are they not right? Because Manchester United went with their emotion with Erik ten Hag and then sacked him early doors in the next season. Haven't the board made a cold-hearted, sensible business decision?
Well, why did you not sack him before that? The whole media and everybody was against Ange for weeks, for months. It's unbelievable. Why they're waiting now? What, they were hoping to win something? Why the decision now suddenly? They want something and they want to go into it, you know? And football is all about the money, you know? It's not about the emotion at all. It's all about the money. And it shows again the day with this decision, and it's exactly the point it comes out. The emotion is not about the football.
Oh, looks like we've lost Ramon Vega, which is a huge shame because I feel like he was just getting started. So this is the situation then. This is why the board will say Ange had to go. 38 points they got. The lowest points for Spurs in a Premier League season. Remember, they lost 22 of their 38 games. There it is, 22 of their 38 games. They've never done that, the worst in their history. So this is Ange Postecoglou's record at Spurs. In 101 games, he won 47, drew 15, lost 39, a win rate of 47%. So our chief correspondent, Kaveh Solokol, and reporter James Savundra are back with us. Ramon Vega says they've got it wrong. They're just thinking about money and they're not thinking about football. Your view, Kaveh?
Look, I know Ramon. He talks a lot of sense. He is Tottenham through and through. He's also somebody who thinks about the game deeply. I think once upon a time he had ambitions to become the president of FIFA. So we should listen when he talks. And of course, I respect his perspective. Having said that, I'm not sure I totally agree with him. I think the Tottenham board had a very, very difficult decision to make. They could have made the decision with their heart. They decided to make the decision with their head. And it's all down to do with the league form. They feel that opponents in the Premier League had worked out how to play against Tottenham and how to beat Tottenham. And Ange Postecoglou hadn't responded to that. They're also worried about the injury record at the club. Was that just normal, or was it being caused by the way Tottenham play, the way Tottenham train? And also, I think they were concerned about the fact that around Christmas time, the league was no longer a priority for Ange Postecoglou. It was all about the Europa League. He sat down and thought, look, we need to get into the Champions League. We're not going to do it via the Premier League. We need to do it via the Europa League. And that paid dividends because they did. They won it and they got into the Champions League. But the way they played in the Premier League was unacceptable. Having said all that, what a way for Ange Postecoglou to go out. If you're going to lose your job, lose it the Ange Postecoglou way. Because his final game, they won a European trophy. A couple of days later, they had an incredible parade. He will always be welcome at Tottenham. Whenever he goes back there, if he goes back there, he will get a hero's reception. He's still a hero in Australia. He's still a hero in Greece. And he still has a vast amount of respect from all kinds of people in the football world, and not just Tottenham supporters, because he really connected with football supporters, because he stood for something, he stood for values that are sort of disappearing from the game. Let's hope he stays in the Premier League. Let's hope he stays in English football, because I think he's not just a big loss for Tottenham, but he's a big loss for the Premier League as well.
James, 16 days since Spurs won the Europa League. And I said to Ramon Vega just then, look, is this not just a serious cold business decision? And he said, look, if that's the case, why didn't they sack him earlier? So what do you make of the timing of Ange going now?
Well, I think already in their mind for the last few months, they've been weighing up this decision, bearing in mind how poor the league form has been. At the same time, this European journey has continued. It went all the way to Bilbao and ended with them lifting their first trophy in 17 years. I think they had in mind what they wanted to do. But when you look at the scenes in North London, the parade, just the emotions of the whole occasion, what it meant to Spurs fans to win a trophy for the first time in nearly 2 decades, I think Daniel Levy and the board wanted to give themselves some time just to make sure they were making the right decision. But ultimately, when they look at the body of work from Ange Postecoglou across 2 seasons in the Premier League, and they admit it themselves in their statement following a positive start, and we've mentioned that positive start. They were top of the Premier League. They won 8 of their first 10 Premier League matches last season, 78 points for their last 66 matches. Spurs let go of Antonio Conte when they were 4th. They sacked Jose Mourinho when they were 7th. So it's no surprise that with Ange Postecoglou finishing 17th in his second season in charge, they had nowhere to go, because this has been the club's worst ever Premier League campaign. 22 defeats in all. They've won 1 of the last 12 in the Premier League. They've won the Europa League. That is huge for this football club. It's a huge moment. It's why Ange Postecoglou will always be a hero. But ultimately, looking towards next season, Spurs in the Champions League, wanting to remain in the Champions League, having finished 17th in the Premier League this season, there were no real signs, aside from that European campaign, that they go on and do something next season, which would see them back in Europe again the following season.
Given the decision that Daniel Levy and the board have made, how much pressure are they under to get their next manager right?
Enormous amount of pressure. Knowing the way football works, I think what would have happened is a couple of months ago, obviously the Tottenham board would have been aware of how poor the league form was. They would have started making plans, because all big companies have to, about the possibility of replacing the manager. So they would have looked around to see who is available. Clubs do that the whole time. They weren't necessarily expecting Ange Postecoglou to lead them to glory in the Europa League. He did that, and then I think the Tottenham board had a decision to make. If they made that decision with their heart, they would have said, you know what, let's give Ange the start of next season and see how it goes. Let's give him that. Give him the Champions League. Surely the league form is going to improve as well. We'll also sign some new players this summer. If it doesn't work out, we will relieve him of his duties around Christmas time. I think the reason they didn't do that is because of the homework they would have done a couple of months ago about the kind of managers, head coaches who are potentially available now in the summer. And those people who are potentially available now may not be available around Christmas time if they were to make a change mid-season. So I think that has been a consideration for them as well. They must know who they want to take over from him. They must have a very, very short list, and they must be pretty sure that they can get one of their top
Indeed.
targets.
All right.
Sports Centre, live from Sky Studios.
Hi, good evening. Welcome along. Great to have you with us in the Sports Centre. So, 2 years to the day since he was appointed Tottenham manager, Ange Postecoglou has been sacked. Tottenham say that it is one of the toughest decisions they've ever had to make, but that they cannot be led by the emotions brought by winning the Europa League.
2 years ago today, I was at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium announcing the appointment of Ange Postecoglou. 2 weeks ago today, it was the parade. 225,000 Spurs fans celebrating a first European trophy in 41 years and a first trophy of any kind for 17 years. And a massive thank you from Tottenham supporters to Ange Postecoglou. I always win things in my second season, he said very early last season, and he delivered. But despite that, it's still not been deemed good enough. And that's because of the very alarming league form, and Spurs have released a statement saying that. And if you look at it next season, of course, a Europa League win ensures Champions League football, and Spurs are concerned about the games coming up, the Saturday, Tuesday, the Sunday, Wednesdays, and of course the Europa League and Champions League are going up such a huge amount of levels. It was a hard decision from the Tottenham Hotspur board, but they have made that decision, and it will be a new head coach. Our understanding is Thomas Frank is a leading contender to replace Ange Postecoglou. Now, many fans are devastated because of what Ange Postecoglou has delivered, the best days of the Spurs fans' footballing lives. But there are some Spurs fans who think it's probably best to part ways on a high. Ange Postecoglou goes and gets a great job, and Spurs move on. I always win things in my second season. He delivered. But he also said 2 weeks ago, season 3 is better than season 2. Unfortunately for Postecoglou, he does not get that season 3, but he does leave this club with his head held high.
Well, I'm joined in the studio by our chief correspondent, Kaveh Solokol, and reporter James Savundra, and we'll get much more from them throughout the evening. First, though, I want to bring you that Tottenham statement. This is what they said after they decided to remove Ange from his job. They said, following a review of performances and after significant reflection, the club can announce that Ange Postecoglou has been relieved of his duties. We're extremely grateful to Ange for his commitment and contribution during his 2 years at the club. Ange will always be remembered as only the third manager in our history to deliver a European trophy, alongside legendary figures Bill Nicholson and Keith Birkinshaw. However, the board has unanimously concluded that it is in the best interest of the club for a change to take place. Following a positive start in the 2023-24 Premier League season, we recorded 78 points from the last 66 Premier League games. This culminated in our worst ever Premier League finish last season. At times, there were extenuating circumstances, injuries, and then a decision to prioritise our European campaign. Whilst winning the Europa League this season ranks as one of the club's greatest moments, we cannot base our decision on emotions aligned to this triumph. This has been one of the toughest decisions we have had to make, and it is not a decision that we have taken lightly, nor one we have rushed to conclude. We've made what we believe is the right decision to give us the best chance of success going forward, not the easy decision. We have a talented young squad, and Ange has given us a great platform to build upon. We should like to express our gratitude to him. We wish him well for the future. He will always be welcome back at our home. Well, our reporter, Jamie Weir, has looked back on the ups and downs of the Ange era at Spurs. I'm told we're going to go to that in a minute, so I'm going to bring you two in before we look back at what Ange has done. First of all, Kaveh, your reaction.
Well, look, I think it's the right decision. It was a difficult decision. I know that sounds a little bit strange to say it's the right decision when Ange Postecoglou has delivered on his main targets. His main targets were to get into the Champions League and to win a trophy. He's done both those things. But unfortunately, look at the Premier League table. Spurs finished 17th. They lost 22 times. They played 38 games, lost 22 of those. That is almost 60% of their games in the league they lost. And I'm afraid when you're the manager, head coach of a club as big as Tottenham, it's simply unacceptable to finish that low in the table. For instance, if an Arsenal manager was to win the Europa League and finish 17th, they would lose their job. Chelsea manager, they would lose their job. So those are the rules of the game. I'm sure Ange Postecoglou will be feeling very disappointed this evening, but I'm pretty sure that he also saw this coming. And the final point I would make is that was a really good statement from Tottenham. Sometimes we see when managers leave a club, they just get a short statement on the website with a few sort of platitudes. But that statement, a lot of thought and effort and emotion went into writing that statement. And I think we just got a sense from reading it of what a difficult decision this was for the Tottenham board.
Difficult decision, James, but they won a European trophy. They've been desperate to win a trophy. They got one. Shouldn't they have given him a little bit more time?
I think when you look at his overall body of work, it was really exciting what he did when he started at Spurs. They were top of the Premier League table for such a long period of time. At the beginning of November, at the start of 2023, just when he joined, they were playing a great brand of football. The signings that he brought in, the likes of James Maddison, was arguably the player of the season at that point. But then things fell apart when they lost to Chelsea. Injury suspensions meant that the season completely nosedived. And when you look at his body of work this season, it simply isn't acceptable, the results that Tottenham have produced, specifically over the course of the last few months. You look at the fact they've won one of the last 12 league matches, 22 defeats, Carvo mentions there. No side has lost that many games previously and not been relegated. There's the most ever defeats from a Premier League club without being relegated, 22 of their 38 matches. One Premier League win since the 22nd of February. That one win came against Southampton. So you can see the results are there for all to see. You can understand why the board have made this decision. In Postecoglou's defence, when you look at the injuries that have hampered the side this season, and that is alluded to in the Tottenham statement, Mickey van der Ven, just 13 league appearances this season, Richarlison 15, Christian Romero 18, the two centre-backs playing less than half the matches over the course of this season, and his captain hasn't delivered, to be honest. Son, 7 goals this season. Dominic Solanke, they spent £65 million on him. Yes, there are injuries, but just 9 goals. Postecoglou will feel he hasn't been helped by the fact that the injuries haven't helped his side. There's been suspensions as well. Bentancur missing 6 games earlier on this season. But ultimately, despite the fact they won in Europe, they completely sacrificed what they did in the Premier League, and that is simply unacceptable for a club like Tottenham in a stadium like that to finish just above the sides who have been relegated and will play football in Championship next season.
And Carve, isn't that the point? Because in the statement, which I agree with you, is very well thought out, they say it's crucial that Spurs compete on multiple fronts. Next season, they're going to be in the Champions League and the Premier League, and Ange has kind of proved he can only do one or the other. Is that why perhaps he's got the boot?
And also, I would put the trophy in perspective. With all due respect, the quality of the Europa League last season was not that great. We didn't have the teams from the Champions League dropping down into it. But having said that, it's a tournament, it's a competition, and Tottenham won it.
You can only win the competition you're in.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't get too carried away by Tottenham winning the Europa League, because when I was growing up, Tottenham were a massive, massive club. They were one of the most glamorous clubs in the country. So I expect them to be challenging to win major trophies like the title. And I think what the board have done is looked at the situation and thought, thank you very much, Ange, but we now need to go in a different direction, because we can't have a league season like we had last season. And there are some really good managers who potentially are available, and there's a long list of managers who would love to manage a club like Tottenham. Yeah,
we'll get into the managers a little bit later on who might come in. But it's Tottenham's worst finish in the Premier League, James. You mentioned it, and they mentioned it in the statement, but there were extenuating circumstances. Have the board just ignored, they've mentioned it, but have they just ignored the fact that they had serious injuries to key players?
And there have been throughout Ange Postecoglou's time at the football club, and Ange would argue that, look at my work over the course of the first 10 matches I had in charge of Tottenham. I think they drew the opening game to Brentford, but it was 8 wins, 2 draws, and then things started to deteriorate because you saw Mickey van der Ven pick up a long-term injury in that game against Chelsea I mentioned. So did James Maddison. There were 2 red cards, there were suspensions, and they couldn't quite recover that season. But one thing that the Tottenham board will argue is that they backed him in every single transfer window, including the January windows when it looked like Spurs needed a bit of support. Well, some may argue, but the board gave him players. Timo Werner and Radu Dragusin came in last January when they needed a centre-back. And look at this January as well. Kevin Danso came in. They brought in a goalkeeper in the form of Anthony Kingsley because Vicario was out injured. And Matisse Tell came in, but Tell didn't deliver what Spurs would have hoped, I guess, over the course of the last few months. And they have backed him in the summer windows. Dominic Solanke coming in for £65 million after scoring pretty much 20 goals in the Premier League the season before. Brennan Johnson, James Maddison, Archie Gray. Whoever takes on this Spurs side will look at some of the players they've got there, and the squad is there to be successful. I guess Ange was backed, but the focus was on signing young players who would eventually come good at Spurs over the course of the next 2 or 3 seasons. They didn't sign players for the here or now, and he seemed, whenever I spoke to him, he seemed really pleased with the project and what they were looking to do as a club. Unfortunately for him, he won't get the opportunity to see out his work and see how the likes of Archie Gray, James Maddison and Brennan Johnson go. We saw how impressive they've been at times this season. But ultimately, when you look at the back end of this season, and there's been some great moments as well, beating Manchester City 4-0 in December. There have been moments where you thought, right, Spurs can hold on to something here, but there was no consistency. They never won back-to-back matches. I think they managed 3 in around January, and you thought maybe they're getting there again, but they couldn't quite do it on a Thursday and a Sunday, and that's ultimately why he's paid for it with his job.
Indeed. Well, hello again. Let's get some more on our top story. Tottenham have sacked Ange Postecoglou just 16 days after he won the Europa League. Well, another manager who was sacked after European success was Thomas Tuchel. He was dismissed by Chelsea 15 months after he won the Champions League. Well, the England head coach said that sacking shows that management is not just about trophies.
I feel for every manager and I have huge sympathy for every manager, especially in these moments, because I feel for them, because I was in the same spot and it feels horrible if you're in that spot. It just shows you that it is about, it is not only obviously about titles. It is, you can, let's say, survive seasons without titles if your connection, the support, the belief and the trust between the coach and the club officials is strong. Then you can overcome seasons without titles. It happens. If there is slight disbelief, if there are concerns, if the trust is not there anymore, obviously, then it is sometimes not even enough to win a trophy after so many years. I mean, I have biggest respect for him. He's a huge character. He brought the trophy. He said he will deliver the trophy in the second year. He did. But this is part of the job. We are responsible for the results and we are responsible for the development of the team. So if we like it or not, we don't like it, of course, but sometimes it is us who take then the full responsibility for a development that is maybe not on the highest potential.
Thomas Tuchel there. All right, let's cross to Tottenham's training ground now. Our reporter Dharmesh Sheth is there for us. Dharmesh, very good evening. So, what are the reasons that Spurs have given for sacking Postecoglou?
Yeah, really interesting actually, because if you read through Tottenham Hotspur's statement this evening and you read between the lines, yes, initially they said Ange Postecoglou brought back an attacking brand of football. He won them their first trophy in 17 years and gave them a night that they'll never forget in Bilbao. But alongside that, they were quick to point out the reasons for his sacking, not least these first 10 games, Tottenham Hotspur won 8 of them and drew 2. And in the 78 since, they've only got 66 points. And this last season was simply unacceptable. They finished 17th. Only the 3 relegated teams finished below them. 38 points from a 38-game season. And they also did say, look, there were accentuating circumstances with regard to injuries, but also it looked like almost a slight dig at Ange Postecoglou, because they said, and the decision to prioritise the Europa League, which of course is what Ange Postecoglou admitted to after they'd beaten Manchester United in Bilbao in that Europa League final. They also said that we cannot base a decision as big as this on emotion alone, which would suggest that if it was an emotional decision, then just because he'd won the Europa League, despite what had happened in the Premier League, they would have kept Ange Postecoglou on in his job. And they've intimated that they could have taken the easy decision, and the easy decision they've implied there would have been keep Ange Postecoglou because he got Tottenham Hotspur their first trophy in 17 years. But it seems that they have thought about this, and 16 days, can you believe it, just 16 days after they did win that Europa League against Manchester United, they've decided, after much deliberation, that the decision and the right decision for this football club is to sack the manager.
Dharmesh, after they won that trophy, we had player after player after player lining up to back the manager. Now he's gone. Any player reaction?
It's interesting you should say that, because I was actually at that final in Bilbao. I was in the mixed zone area after the game. We spoke to Heung-min Son, we spoke to Kevin Danso, and they both said, listen, we were doing this as much for the manager as much as we were doing it for the club because of all the criticism had faced over the past season or so. But I have to say that one of the players has come out on Instagram, that's Pedro Porro, and he's released this statement. He says this about Ange Postecoglou. He says, "Thank you for everything, boss, for mentoring me early on, helping me settle into the club and trusting me out on the pitch. I'll always be grateful for the way you led us, defended us and kept us going through all the highs and lows. Above everything, you gave us one of the greatest moments in the club's history, and for that, you'll always be celebrated. Wishing you all the very best, boss." I'm sure there will be more players who will be coming out sooner rather than later to pay tribute to the now sacked Ange Postecoglou.
Well, next season, those players are going to be playing under somebody else. We've been speaking about Thomas Frank a fair bit, but are there more people in the frame, Dharmesh?
Listen, what did Ange Postecoglou say at that parade? Season 3 is always better than season 2, but he did say that in a press conference before the Brighton game, in the final game of the season, that he forgot to realise that the main character usually gets killed off in season 3. That is in fact what has happened. Tottenham fans will still be hoping that season 3 is better than last season, and they will of course have a new manager. They've admired a number of current Premier League managers in the past, have Tottenham Hotspur, the likes of Bournemouth's Andoni Iraola and Fulham's Marco Silva as well, but it appears that the leading contender is Brentford manager Thomas Frank. As yet, no approach, but it feels like that will happen sooner rather than later. But we think that at this juncture, Thomas Frank is the leading candidate to replace Ange Postecoglou.
Dharmesh Sheth, live from Tottenham's training ground. Thanks, Dharmesh.
Ya saltan 1K y el barrio. Es determinante cuánto daño puede hacer el conjunto de 1K, sobre todo con Granero en esas primeras de cambio en la salida de escalera. Así que esa parte del partido va a ser absolutamente clave para el equipo de Iker Casillas. Por cierto, felicitar porque ha venido una buena afición de 1K.
Tiene la pelota Gerard Noya en cara, sigue Noya, dispara, Arnalot.
80 paradas.
paradas ya para Arnalot. Gil Vidal ataca desde la derecha el número 9. Gil Vidal con el centro, buena pelota, Arché, con la rodilla le pegó. Pues es el que desatasca un poco el partido, ¿no? Con centros, ojo ahí, se golpeó, el remate, ¡gol! ¡Mar Valiente! ¡Gol! Del barrio, marca Mar Valiente. Esa banda izquierda que es terreno de los cañonazos de Granero, a la que tengo un mínimo de espacio, le pega Granero. Bueno, pues es decirlo, y ahí lo tenemos. El tema es que el remate le ha salido centrado. Abraham, buena pelota, banda derecha. Vamos a ver qué hace ahí Fran Rodríguez, se mete en el área, sigue Fran. ¡Qué bien Fran! Se va de 2, el remate, ¡fuera!
¡Chicos!
A ver si acierta. ¡Claro que
Mira
sí! Busca el barrio el segundo gol. Arché. Arché para Gil. Gil que le puede pegar a este Gil, buen recorte. ¡Gil al palo! ¡Manda Arché!
¡Dios! ¡No! Madre mía, qué parada. Y a centímetros del remate, ¿eh?
No, la reacción ha sido impresionante. ¡El disparo! ¡Madre de Dios! ¡Otro que vuela! ¡Otro más! Que está la pelota para John de la Cruz, la quiere levantar, vuelve a pegar la pelota en el cuerpo de un jugador del barrio, el remate con la puntera y acaba deteniendo a Gerard Vacas. Será córner favorable a 1K. Bueno, a ver.
Gol doble.
Gol doble. A ver, saque de banda. Balón puesto en movimiento, intentaba rematar Mar Valiente, el remate, ¡gol! ¡Bumper! ¡Gol! ¡Penalti
¡Madre
normal!
mía lo de los penaltis!
¡Penalti normal! Y el que quiere hacer el 0-3 es el número 4, Pega Valiente. ¡Vaya cañón! ¡Gol! Ahí están, Arnalot y Vacas como candidatos, como guardametas, y también Mar Valiente y Pau Feroz con la recuperación. Tiene la pelota al Barrio que puede sentenciar el remate. ¡Gol!
Knockout.
¡Let's go, Barria! Ponme en 5, ponme en 5, ponme en 5.
El cambio del partido ha sido radical en los últimos 10 minutos. El balón que lo tiene. ¡Ojo!
¡Ay, ay, 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 ay! Jaimitada.
Marca de nuevo el Barrio, gol de Fran Fuentes. El equipo de Juan Arroita, que no ganaba un encuentro con esta tranquilidad, entre comillas, al final, con un margen tan amplio, con 2 goles dobles que han hecho pasar el partido del 0-3 al 0-7.
Paufer, ha costado, pero por fin ha llegado esa victoria tan deseada con goleada.
Ha costado mucho, pero bueno, le damos emoción hasta el momento final, recta final, y ahora, pase lo que pase con Pío, nos lo jugaremos contra ellos.
Eso te iba a decir, pase lo que pase con Pío, la semana que viene o ellos o tú, o tu ex equipo o tú.
Bueno, o el Barrio o ellos, pero sí. La vida, yo qué sé, no sé, son cosas muy raras que suceden, pero ahí estaremos. Ahora estoy en el Barrio, así que espero que gane el Barrio.
Enhorabuena y a disfrutarlo.
Gracias.